The house felt like a prison. As I wheeled myself through the narrow hallway, the silence was deafening. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when the laughter of my children and the warm voice of my husband filled these walls. But now, all that remained was coldness and distance. It had been 5 months since the accident that had left me in this wheelchair. 5 months since my life had changed forever. I used to be so full of life, running around, playing with my children, cooking, laughing, living. But that was before my world crashed down. I remember that night like it was yesterday. The night I found out that the man I loved, the father of my children, had been seeing someone else. It was a Thursday, the day I had planned to make his favorite meal, to rekindle the spark in our marriage. Instead, I walked in on him, with her. The scene is burned into my memory. My husband, Kofi, who I had spent 12 years with, sitting on the couch in our living room with another woman. She was younger than me, slimmer too, her laugh high-pitched and careless, while Kofi's face was flushed, his usual calm demeanor completely gone. It felt like the floor beneath me had been ripped out. The truth hit me harder than the accident ever had. My legs may have failed me, but my heart felt even more crippled. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. I just stared at them, my husband's hand resting on her thigh, her fingers tangled in his hair. And then I saw the look in his eyes, the same eyes that once held nothing but love for me. For a moment, I thought I might scream, or maybe faint. Instead, I felt like I was frozen in time. There was no anger, no rage, just a deep, aching sadness that consumed me. Then Kofi looked up. His face went white, and he jerked away from her, but it was too late. I'd seen everything, and there was no going back. "What's going on here?" I managed to croak, my voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. His eyes flickered to me and then back to her, a nervous, almost guilty glance. The woman, who was dressed in a tight red dress that barely covered her thighs, straightened up, her eyes wide with shock and discomfort. I can explain, baby," Kofi stammered, standing up, his hands outstretched. "Explain," I repeated, my voice rising, though I didn't have the strength to shout. "Explain what, Kofi? That you've been cheating on me? On us? For how long?" The woman looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Kofi's face reddened. I wheeled myself closer, the wheelchair squeaking painfully on the floor, but I didn't care. I wasn't afraid anymore. "How long, Kofi? How long have you been lying to me? To our children?" My heart pounded. The betrayal, the lies, everything I thought I knew about the man I married, shattered before my eyes. He didn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like he was searching for the right words. But there were none. I could feel the tears welling up, but I didn't let them fall. Not in front of him. Not anymore. The woman cleared her throat awkwardly, standing up. "Maybe I should go," she said quietly, taking a few steps back toward the door. "No," Kofi said, shaking his head as if he didn't want to lose face. I'll walk you out." He walked past me, not even sparing me a glance. He didn't care. "Don't bother," I said bitterly, my voice cutting through the silence between us. "Go with her. Go live your new life. You don't need me anymore." The words stung as they left my lips, but they were true. He didn't care. Not anymore. I watched him leave with her, the sound of the door closing behind them almost deafening in the quiet that followed. I sat there for a long time, my mind swirling with thoughts, emotions, and confusion. But one thing was clear. Kofi had chosen her over me, and there was nothing I could do to change that. But this wasn't the end. No, it was just the beginning. Because as I sat there in my wheelchair, alone, my life was about to change in a way I never saw coming. There would be someone else. Someone who would see me not as the broken woman in the wheelchair but as the strong, resilient woman I was. Someone who would show me that maybe, just maybe, there was life after the pain. But I had no idea who that someone was, or what they had in store for me. Welcome to Stories by Anif. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family. The days that followed were the hardest I had ever faced. Kofi didn't come back. Not that I expected him to. After all, he had walked out on me, his wife, in front of the woman he'd been seeing behind my back. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was emptiness. I spent most of my time in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what went wrong. I had tried to be the perfect wife. I cooked, I cleaned, I raised our 3 children, and I always made sure Kofi had what he needed. But none of that mattered. He had found someone else, someone younger, someone better, at least in his eyes. It's funny how quickly things can change. One minute, I was planning a future with the man I thought I would grow old with. The next, I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. The kids were the only thing that kept me going. They didn't understand. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Where's Daddy? When is he coming back? How could I explain to them that the man they loved wasn't the person they thought he was? How could I explain to them that their father had betrayed us all? I tried to keep things normal for their sake, but it was hard. I put on a brave face, but inside, I was falling apart. 2 weeks passed without a word from Kofi. I filed for separation, and the lawyers started handling the paperwork. I was done with him, done with the lies, done with the betrayal. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. I didn't expect to meet him, not in the state I was in. I didn't expect anyone to even look my way. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It was a Tuesday when it happened. I had just dropped the kids off at school and was heading home when I ran into him. I had to stop and blink twice to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Standing outside a high-end coffee shop was a man, dressed in a tailored suit, leaning against a shiny black car. His eyes caught mine instantly, and for a brief moment, everything around us faded. It was as if the world had stopped spinning, and all I could hear was my heart beating in my chest. He smiled, a kind smile, and walked toward me. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "but I couldn't help but notice you. You seem like you're in need of some company." I could feel my cheeks flush. What did he mean? Who was he? I don't... I stammered, unsure of what to say. "My name's Tunde," he continued. "Tunde Adeyemi. I just moved to the area for a new job. You look like you could use a friend." There was something about the way he spoke, so effortlessly confident, yet so caring. And something about him felt familiar, even though I was sure I had never met him before. "I'm not interested," I said quickly, looking away, but he didn't back off. He seemed genuinely interested in me, and that threw me off. Here I was, just a woman in a wheelchair, struggling to rebuild her life, and he was offering me company? "I didn't mean to offend you," Tunde said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I was just trying to make a connection. I know it's a strange thing to do, but you seem like someone who's been through a lot. I'm not trying to rush you, but maybe we could talk sometime? I know a place nearby, and I'd love to hear your story." I didn't know what to think. I didn't know how to respond. This man, a stranger, wanted to listen to me? To hear my story? "I'm sorry," I muttered, ready to turn away. "I have a lot on my plate right now." But he didn't let me leave. Instead, he gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Just for a moment, but it was enough to send a wave of warmth through me. "Look, I get it," he said, his voice softer now. "You don't have to say yes right now, but just think about it. Sometimes talking to someone can make all the difference." I stood there, staring at him, uncertain of what to do. Part of me wanted to say yes, to let him in. But then I remembered Kofi. I remembered the man who had promised me everything and broken it all. "I'll think about it," I finally said. And with that I turned and wheeled away. As I made my way back to my apartment, I couldn't shake the image of Tunde from my mind. Who was he, and why did he seem so different from everyone else? Was this the beginning of something new, or was it just another distraction that would lead to more heartbreak? I wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. I hadn't felt this alive in a long time. But little did I know, this encounter was the start of a journey that would change my life forever. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about Tunde and our brief encounter. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Calm, kind, and sincere, as though he genuinely cared. But I couldn't let myself be swept away by a stranger's kindness. Not again. Not after everything Kofi had done. It was hard to admit, but I had been lonely for so long. Not just physically alone because of my wheelchair, but emotionally. After Kofi's betrayal, I had closed myself off. No one had even come close to breaking through my walls until Tunde. I tried to push the thoughts away. The kids needed me. I had to get back to my life, to rebuild what was left of my family. But something kept nagging at me. I spent most of the day sorting through paperwork. Lawyers, separation agreements, custody arrangements. Kofi hadn't made the process easy, and every email from his lawyer felt like a slap in the face. I had no idea where his head was at, no idea what he was thinking. But I knew this, he was probably with her. His young lover, the one he had chosen over me. I couldn't help but feel that sharp pang of jealousy. It was ridiculous. He didn't deserve my feelings. He didn't deserve anything from me. Still, when I picked up the phone to call Tunde, I hesitated. I had told him I would think about it, and I had. But the more I thought, the more confused I became. I had spent my entire life supporting someone who never valued me. Could I really trust myself to make better choices now? I stared at my phone screen, my fingers hovering over the dial button. What if Tunde was just another man who saw my situation as a project? Another man who wanted to save me out of some misguided sense of charity? But then I remembered the way he had looked at me, the way he hadn't treated me like a broken person, but as someone who still had value. That had been something I hadn't felt in so long. Just a cup of coffee, I muttered to myself. Nothing more. I pressed the button and waited as the phone rang. The seconds stretched on. When he finally answered, his voice was warm and friendly, just as I remembered. "Hello, Tunde." My voice was a little shakier than I intended. "It's me. I've been thinking about what you said. I'd like to take you up on that offer." There was a brief pause before he responded, his voice filled with something like relief. "I'm glad you called. When would be a good time for you?" "Tomorrow," I said quickly. I didn't want to give myself too much time to second guess. "Perfect. I'll pick you up at noon. Wear something comfortable." I smiled despite myself. "All right, I'll see you tomorrow." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time. I had no idea what I was doing. Was I ready to let someone new into my life? Was I even ready to move on from Kofi? But no matter how much I wanted to pretend everything was fine, deep down, I knew I couldn't stay stuck in the past forever. I couldn't keep letting Kofi's mistakes define me. I couldn't keep living in a shadow of my own pain. It was time to take a step forward, even if it scared me. The next day, as I stood in front of the mirror, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. I had spent so many years taking care of everyone else, making sure everyone else's needs were met, that I had forgotten how to take care of myself, how to feel good about myself again. I put on a simple dress, something light and airy, something that didn't make me feel weighed down by all the baggage I was carrying. I didn't know what was going to happen with Tunde, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. When I opened the door and saw him waiting in his black SUV, I felt a flutter of something. Anticipation, maybe, or maybe just the hope that this could be the beginning of something better. Tunde stood there with a smile, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Wow, you look amazing," he said, his voice sincere. I smiled back, though I wasn't sure if I should have been flattered or if it was too soon. Still, it felt good to hear someone say something nice about me. It had been so long since I had received a compliment that felt genuine. We spent the next hour driving around the city, talking about nothing and everything at once. Tunde was easy to talk to, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with anyone in years. It felt so natural, almost as if we had known each other far longer than just a couple of days. When we finally stopped at a little cafe on the edge of the city, I was surprised. It wasn't anything fancy, but it felt cozy, intimate. The kind of place you could sit and talk for hours without feeling rushed. So, Tunde said after we had ordered, tell me about you. Who is the real you? Not the wife, not the mother, just you. The question took me off guard. Most people only wanted to talk about what I used to be, what I had been before everything fell apart. But Tunde was asking about the me that was still here, the one who had survived all of it. I took a deep breath and tried to find the words. I guess I'm someone who has lost a lot, but I'm not giving up. I want to rebuild. I want to be me again, you know? He nodded, his gaze steady. I understand. And I'm here, whenever you're ready to take that next step. I wasn't sure what I was ready for yet, but one thing was certain. I hadn't felt this hopeful in a long time. But little did I know, this simple meeting was about to take a turn I never expected. The days after meeting Tunde felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like I was just a broken woman in a wheelchair, consumed by the aftermath of Kofi's betrayal. Tunde's presence, his kindness, and the way he made me feel valued were like a salve to my wounds. We met a few more times over the next couple of weeks. Our conversations were easy, filled with laughter and curiosity. He listened when I spoke, never interrupting, never judging. And unlike Kofi, Tunde didn't try to fix me or pity me. He simply let me be myself, something I hadn't experienced in so long. But as much as I enjoyed our time together, I couldn't shake the voice in my head that kept reminding me of Kofi. He was still my children's father, and despite everything, I couldn't just erase the years we spent together. I hadn't fully processed the pain, not yet. I couldn't just move on as if nothing had happened. Do you ever think about him? Tunde asked one afternoon, his voice unusually soft. We were sitting at the park, the autumn sun casting golden light over the city. I had asked him about his past, his family, and his career, but I hadn't really talked about my marriage, about Kofi. I had kept that part of me locked away for fear of unraveling everything. I took a deep breath, looking out at the people walking by. I try not to, I said, but it's hard. He was my whole world for so long. I don't know how to just let go. Tunde's hand rested gently on mine, the warmth of his touch sending a ripple of calm through my chest. You don't have to rush it, you know, he said, his voice steady. Take all the time you need. You deserve to heal. And no matter what, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. His words hit me harder than I expected. A lump formed in my throat, and I had to fight to keep the tears at bay. Why was it that the man I'd married, the father of my children, couldn't offer me this comfort? Why was it that the man I thought I would grow old with had been the one to leave me, to break my heart? But here was Tunde, someone I barely knew, offering me more compassion than Kofi had in years. I don't know how to trust again, I whispered. I don't know if I'll ever be able to. Tunde smiled softly, squeezing my hand. Trust isn't something you give overnight. It's earned and it's built one step at a time. But you don't have to trust all at once. You can take it slow. You can take your time. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to think that maybe, just maybe, there could be something more between Tunde and me. But the doubts still lingered. I didn't know if I was ready. I didn't know if I could ever truly open my heart again. The next few days were filled with busy moments. Taking care of the kids, juggling my responsibilities, and managing the never-ending paperwork related to the separation. But every moment I had to myself, I found myself thinking about Tunde, about his kindness, about the way he made me feel seen, heard, and valued. One evening, while I was sitting alone in the living room, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. Could have been Kofi, sending another cold message through his lawyer. Or perhaps a bill collector, reminding me of the mounting debts. But when I saw Tunde's name on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. I answered quickly. "Hello. Hey." Tunde's voice was warm as always. "I was wondering if you'd like to join me for dinner tomorrow night? I know a great place, nothing fancy, just a quiet spot. What do you think?" I hesitated, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that next step. Was it too soon? Should I just keep things casual? But the truth was, I wanted to see him again. I wanted to know more about him. "I'd love to," I finally said. "Tomorrow sounds perfect." I could hear the smile in his voice as he replied, "Great, I'll pick you up at 7. As the call ended, I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone. I wasn't sure what to expect from this dinner. But I knew one thing: it felt different with Tunde. It didn't feel like I was rushing into something or making a mistake. Felt right. The next evening, I found myself standing in front of the mirror once again, this time carefully choosing what to wear. I wanted to look my best, but not like I was trying too hard. I wanted to be myself. I settled on a simple dress that was comfortable yet flattering. I brushed my hair out and applied just a little makeup. It had been a long time since I'd done something for myself, and I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. When Tunde arrived at my apartment, he looked as handsome as ever in a dark suit that seemed tailor-made for him. His smile was warm, and when he saw me, his eyes lit up. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice sincere. I felt a flush of warmth on my cheeks. "Thank you." As we drove to the restaurant, the conversation flowed easily, just like it had before. Tunde asked me about my life, my dreams, and my fears. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself sharing things with him that I had kept hidden for years. My frustrations with Kofi, my insecurities about my disability, my desire to find happiness again. "I want more for my life," I told him, my voice quiet. "I don't want to be just someone's wife. I want to be me again." Tunde nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "I think you'll find that person again. And when you do, it will be worth it." Dinner was simple, delicious, but not extravagant. But what mattered more was how I felt in Tunde's presence. I felt heard, valued, and respected. It was the kind of feeling I had longed for, and it made me realize how much I had been missing. By the end of the night, I didn't want to say goodbye. But when we reached my apartment, I knew it was time. Tunde walked me to the door, his hand lingering gently on my shoulder. "I'll see you again soon," he said, his voice soft but hopeful. I smiled, my heart racing. "I look forward to it." As I closed the door behind me, I leaned against it, closing my eyes for a moment. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had hope again. And that was a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to experience in far too long. But little did I know, the connection I was beginning to build with Tunde would soon be tested in ways I never could have imagined. The weeks with Tunde felt like a dream. Every moment spent with him felt like stepping into a new chapter, one filled with promise, excitement, and maybe even healing. I had grown so accustomed to the pain and emptiness that the idea of moving forward, of trusting someone again, seemed almost impossible. But Tunde made it seem so effortless. His kindness, his patience, his genuine interest in me. It was like a breath of fresh air. But just as I was beginning to feel like I could finally leave the past behind, the shadows of my old life came crashing back in. It happened one afternoon when I was out shopping for groceries. I had decided to take the kids to the market, something that had become one of our routines. It was a small escape for us, a way to enjoy the simple things in life, despite everything we had been through. As I wheeled myself through the crowded aisles, my children chatting excitedly around me. I felt the familiar weight of someone's eyes on me. I turned my head, my gaze landing on a figure standing just a few feet away. It was Kofi. He was standing there, his hands shoved into the pockets of his expensive suit, looking at me with that same blank expression I had grown so used to. But there was something different about him this time. He wasn't looking at me with anger or indifference. He was studying me, and for the first time in months, I felt a chill run down my spine. "Kofi," I said, barely above a whisper. I hadn't expected to see him. Not here, not now. He didn't immediately respond. He just stared at me, as though he was trying to figure out what to say. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost guarded. "I didn't think I'd find you here," he said, his eyes flickering briefly to the children before returning to me. I was taken aback. He hadn't even acknowledged the situation, the one that had destroyed our marriage, the one that had torn everything apart. He hadn't apologized, and he hadn't asked about the kids. He had just shown up. "What do you want, Kofi?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Isn't this enough? Aren't you happy now with her? What do you want from me?" His expression faltered for a second, but he quickly masked it with a look of indifference. "I want to know how you're doing. I'm not here to fight, promise. I just want to talk." His use of my name, promise, hit me harder than I thought it would. It felt foreign coming from him, like something we had left behind long ago. "I'm fine," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You've made your choice, Kofi. We're done. There's nothing more to say." I could see his jaw tighten, and for a moment it almost looked like he was regretting something. But just as quickly, the mask slipped back into place. "I know you're angry, but I'm here now," he said, his voice low but persistent. "And I want to fix things. I want us to be a family again." His words felt like a punch to my gut. How could he say that? After everything? After the lies, the betrayal, the way he had walked out on me? "You walked away, Kofi," I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to hold it together. "You left me in this chair, in this life we built, and now you think you can just come back and act like nothing happened?" I could feel my chest tightening, the anger bubbling up again. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I had fought so hard to move on, to heal, and here he was, acting like he could simply erase the past. "I'm sorry for what I did," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But we can fix this. We can make it right. I know we can." I stared at him, speechless for a long moment. Could I really forgive him? Could I go back to that life, to that love that had so quickly turned into pain? "No," I said finally, shaking my head. "It's over, Kofi. You've made your choice and I've made mine." And with that, I turned my wheelchair around, wheeling myself away from him, away from the man who had once been my everything. The kids were still arguing over what snacks to buy, unaware of the tension that had just taken place. But as I pushed the cart down the aisle, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just Kofi's sudden reappearance. It was the way he had looked at me, like he wasn't finished with me yet, like he wasn't ready to let go. That evening, as I sat in my living room with the kids, I found myself replaying the encounter over and over in my mind. I knew Kofi. I knew how he thought, how he manipulated situations to his advantage. This wasn't about love or regret. It was about control. And just as I was starting to feel like I had put him behind me, I got a call. It was from Tunde. "Promise," he said, his voice sounding urgent. "I need to talk to you. I've just heard something. Something that might change everything." My heart skipped a beat. What could he possibly mean? What was going on? "I'll be there in an hour," he said before hanging up, leaving me in stunned silence. Was this about Kofi? Or was it something else? My mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was clear. My life was about to take another unexpected turn. I had no idea how much this would change things. But one thing was certain. I couldn't hide from the past forever. And whatever Tunde had to say, it was going to bring everything into focus. The phone call from Tunde left me unsettled. His voice had carried an urgency I couldn't ignore, and now, as I sat waiting for him to arrive, I felt a growing sense of unease. What could he have heard that would make him so serious? Was it about Kofi? Had Tunde uncovered something I hadn't been able to see? I didn't have the answers, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter by the minute. When the doorbell rang, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I wasn't ready. I had barely had time to collect my thoughts, but I couldn't put this off. I needed to hear what he had to say, whether I was ready for it or not. I wheeled myself to the door and opened it to find Tunde standing there, looking more serious than I had ever seen him. His usual warm, confident demeanor was replaced by something colder, more guarded. "Promise, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "About what?" I asked, trying to mask the anxiety in my tone. "What's going on?" He glanced over his shoulder, as though making sure no one was listening, before stepping inside. "It's about Kofi," he said, his words carrying a weight I hadn't expected. "I don't know how much you've figured out, but I think it's time you knew the full truth." I blinked, unable to process what he was saying. "Kofi? What did Tunde know that I didn't?" "What truth?" I asked, feeling a surge of panic. "What do you mean?" Tunde sighed, pulling up a chair and sitting across from me. His face was set in a grim expression. "Promise, there's more to Kofi's betrayal than you realize. He hasn't been honest with you about a lot of things." I felt my heart start to race. "What are you talking about?" "There's a reason Kofi left you," Tunde continued. "A reason he walked out on you and the kids. It wasn't just about the other woman. It goes deeper than that." I could barely breathe. My head was spinning, but I managed to push out the question that had been on the tip of my tongue. "What do you mean? What else is there?" Tunde leaned forward, his voice quiet but intense. "Kofi isn't just cheating on you, promise. He's been involved in something much bigger. Something illegal." I froze, the words hitting me like a slap to the face. Illegal? What was he talking about? "Kofi's been involved with people who aren't exactly law-abiding," Tunde continued, his tone cautious. "I've been investigating some business dealings, and I've come across some information. Kofi's company has been involved in shady contracts, financial fraud, and money laundering." My mind couldn't process the words fast enough. Kofi had always been a businessman, but I had never suspected that he might be involved in something so dangerous. Was this the real reason he left? Was it about more than just the affair? "You're saying Kofi's been involved in crime?" I asked, disbelief filling my voice. Tunde nodded grimly. "Yes, and I think he knew the moment you found out about his affair that it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. He was trying to protect himself. That's why he distanced himself from you. He knew the situation was about to blow up." I sat there in shock, trying to make sense of what Tunde was telling me. All this time, I had believed that Kofi's affair was the worst thing he had done, that the betrayal had been the worst of it. But this was something else entirely. My entire perception of the man I had loved was crumbling before my eyes. "But why didn't he tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why didn't he warn me? Why didn't he trust me enough to share this?" Tunde sighed, his face softening. "I think he was trying to protect you in his own messed-up way. He didn't want you to get caught up in it. But it's too late now. The people Kofi's been dealing with won't stop just because he's out of the picture. They'll come after anyone who's connected to him." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" "I don't know yet," Tunde said, his expression serious. "But I can't just stand by and let you be a target. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe, promise. You don't have to go through this alone." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't just dealing with a broken marriage or the heartbreak of Kofi's betrayal. I was caught up in something far more dangerous, something that could affect not just me, but my children as well. I felt my heart sink. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for myself. This wasn't the future I had fought so hard to build. But I couldn't turn back now. Kofi's lies had pulled me into something much darker than I had ever imagined, and I had to face it head-on. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "But I need time. I need to think about all of this." Tunde stood up, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Take all the time you need. But just know this, whatever happens, I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you." As I sat there, staring at the door that Tunde had just walked out of, a feeling of dread settled in my chest. The world I had known had just shifted beneath me. Kofi's betrayal was no longer just a personal heartbreak. It was a danger to everything I held dear. And the worst part was, I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. As I lay awake that night, my thoughts racing, I realized that the world I had been trying so hard to put behind me was far from over. Kofi's secrets were just the beginning, and everything I thought I knew about my life was about to be torn apart. But there was one thing I was certain of. I wasn't going to face this alone. Not anymore. The following days felt like a blur. The revelation about Kofi had thrown me into a state of constant worry. Everything I had believed about my marriage, about the life I had built with him, had been shattered in an instant. But it wasn't just the betrayal that rattled me. It was the fact that Kofi had been involved in something criminal, something dangerous. And now I was somehow tied to it. I couldn't stop thinking about what Tunde had said. Kofi's shady business dealings, the money laundering, the fraud, it was all too much. How could I have been so blind to it all? How could I have missed the signs? I spent the next few days trying to regain some sense of normalcy. I focused on the kids, tried to keep up with daily routines, and pushed the anxiety to the back of my mind. But it wasn't easy. Every time I walked past the phone, I couldn't help but wonder if Kofi would call, or if I'd receive a threatening message from one of his associates. And then, there was the nagging feeling that somehow Kofi's mess was going to pull me deeper into the chaos. One evening, as I was getting the kids ready for bed, the doorbell rang. I hadn't been expecting anyone, and the timing felt off. My pulse quickened as I wheeled myself toward the door, a sense of unease washing over me. When I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't Tunde, and it wasn't Kofi. Standing on my doorstep was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a serious look on his face. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, and his eyes were piercing, calculating. "Are you Promise?" he asked, his voice low and professional. I nodded, unsure of what to expect. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Agent Thomas," he said, flashing a badge that instantly caught my attention. "I'm with the government. I need to speak with you." A wave of panic surged through me. Government? What did they want with me? Was this about Kofi? About his illegal dealings? I tried to remain calm, though my mind was racing. "About what?" "It's regarding your husband, Kofi Adeyemi," Agent Thomas said, his tone serious. "We need to ask you a few questions." I felt my stomach twist into knots. "I don't know anything about him," I said quickly, my voice sharp. "He's been out of my life for weeks now. He left me and the kids." The agent's eyes softened for just a moment before he spoke again. "We're aware of that, Mrs. Adeyemi. But your husband is involved in an investigation that's much larger than he realizes. And we believe you have information that can help us." I took a step back, my heart pounding. "I don't understand. I don't have anything to do with his business dealings." Agent Thomas nodded, as if anticipating my response. "We know that, ma'am. But your husband's actions have put you and your family in danger. There are people after him, and unfortunately, now that you're linked to him by marriage, you're a part of this mess whether you like it or not." I was frozen, the weight of his words settling like a heavy stone in my chest. I had hoped, prayed even, that Kofi's criminal life was behind me. But now it seemed that I couldn't escape the damage he had caused. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "We need your help," Agent Thomas replied. "You're one of the few people who may have insight into Kofi's connections. We've been tracking him for months, but he's been clever, too clever. We need to know everything you can tell us about him. His business, his associates, anything." I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. "I don't know much. I didn't even know about his other life until recently." "That's why we need your cooperation," Agent Thomas said, his voice firm but not unkind. "We believe Kofi has been keeping information from you, but we think you might know more than you realize. The more we understand about him, the quicker we can neutralize the threat he poses." I swallowed hard, feeling as if the walls were closing in around me. The last thing I wanted to do was get involved in Kofi's mess. But what choice did I have? He had dragged me into this, whether I wanted to be or not. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll help, but you have to promise me that my children and I will be safe." Agent Thomas nodded. "That's our priority. We'll take every measure to protect you." As he spoke, I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but I also knew that I was now in the middle of something much bigger than I ever expected. And though I had agreed to help, the fear of what was to come was unbearable. The next morning, Tunde called me. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable tension behind it. "Promise we need to talk," he said. "I found something that could change everything." "What is it?" I asked, the knot in my stomach tightening. "It's about Kofi, and it's bigger than we thought." I didn't know what he meant, but I could feel that this conversation was about to take a turn I wasn't prepared for. The deeper I got into this, the more dangerous it became. I knew one thing for sure. My life, my children's lives, were at risk, and I was caught in the middle of a dangerous game I never asked to play. As I hung up the phone, a sense of dread filled me. The secrets were coming to light, but at what cost? The morning after Agent Thomas's visit, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. My life, everything I had worked for, everything I had believed, was crumbling piece by piece. And now, I was stuck in the middle of a situation I never asked for, with Kofi's dangerous dealings threatening not only my family but also my very existence. I hadn't slept much that night. The thought of what Agent Thomas had said, the fact that I was now entangled in a web of criminal activity that I hadn't even known existed, kept me up. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no choice but to face this head-on. There was no escaping it. Tunde had called earlier, asking to meet. I didn't know what else I could do, but I agreed. Maybe, just maybe, he had some answers that would help me understand just how deep Kofi's betrayal went and what I could do to protect myself and my children. When I arrived at the cafe where we'd agreed to meet, Tunde was already there, sitting at a table near the window. His eyes met mine as I approached, and for a brief moment, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Concern, fear even. His usual calm was gone. "Promise," he said, his voice low. "There's more to this than you realize." I sat down across from him, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" "I've been doing some digging," Tunde continued, leaning in slightly as if to emphasize the gravity of his words. "And I found something about Kofi's business. Something that could change everything." I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "What did you find?" Tunde hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the door as if making sure no one was listening. "Kofi's been working with a man named Samuel Okafor. He's one of the most dangerous criminals in this region. Okafor's organization is involved in money laundering, arms trafficking, and other illicit activities. And Kofi, he's been helping him. His company is a front for these operations." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I had suspected that Kofi's business dealings were shady, but I never imagined it would be this bad. This was far beyond anything I had ever anticipated. "But why?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Why would Kofi get involved in something like this? Tunde sighed, his expression filled with frustration. Kofi's always been ambitious, but this is different. I think he got in over his head. Samuel Okafor's group doesn't take kindly to people who back out or try to leave the operation. And now Kofi's a liability. That's why he left you. He was trying to protect you, but also trying to protect himself. I sat back in my chair, stunned by what Tunde was telling me. Kofi had never mentioned Okafor, never mentioned anything that would hint at this kind of danger. How could I have been so blind? But I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. If Kofi was trying to protect me, why didn't he tell me the truth? Why didn't he warn me? Tunde's face softened, and he reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. Because, promise, he didn't want to drag you into this. He didn't want you to be part of the mess he had created. But now it's too late. You're already involved. And we have to figure out a way to get you out of this before it's too late. I swallowed hard, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I had no idea what to do. I couldn't just turn my back on my children, on the life I was trying to rebuild. But I also couldn't ignore the very real danger that Kofi's actions had brought into my life. What do we do now? I asked, my voice trembling. We need to find Okafor, Tunde said, his tone firm. And we need to find Kofi. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this situation becomes. If Kofi's still in contact with Okafor, there's no telling what could happen. I felt a chill run down my spine. And what if we can't find him? What if Kofi's already gone? Tunde looked me in the eye, his expression resolute. Then we'll find another way. We have to. Because you and your kids can't keep living like this, promise. You're caught in the middle of a war that isn't yours. And I'm not going to let you face it alone. His words struck me hard. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I wasn't alone. Tunde was offering me a lifeline, a way out of this nightmare. And as much as I hated that my life had come to this, I knew I couldn't face it without his help. I don't know how to thank you, I said quietly, my eyes welling up with emotion. You've done so much already. Tunde shook his head. You don't have to thank me, but you need to understand something. This is bigger than just you. Kofi's actions have put everyone in danger. And if we don't act fast, it's not just your family that will be at risk. It's everyone connected to him. The weight of his words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my children, about everyone I loved, and the life I was trying to build. The threat was real and it was closing in. We spent the next few hours discussing our plan. Tunde was determined to find Kofi, to get to the heart of this mess before it was too late. But the deeper we dug, the more dangerous things became. There were whispers of Okafor's men watching Kofi's associates, of dangerous players who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. As I drove home later that evening, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I wasn't just fighting for my future anymore. I was fighting for my survival. But as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. Kofi's car was parked outside my house, and standing beside it, talking to someone in a dark suit, was none other than Samuel Okafor. I froze, my blood running cold. The man I had once called my husband was standing there, with the very person who had dragged us into this nightmare. The time for running was over. I couldn't move. I sat frozen in my car, my eyes fixed on the scene unfolding in front of me. There, standing near the front door of my house, was Kofi, my husband, who had walked away from me and the kids only weeks ago, talking casually to the very man I feared most, Samuel Okafor. The man I once called my husband was now shaking hands with a known criminal, someone whose name had been whispered in the dark corners of every street I had walked through, someone whose reputation was built on fear, manipulation, and violence. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. After everything Kofi had put me through, after all the lies and betrayals, he was standing there, acting as though nothing had ever happened, as though he had never walked out on our family. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen this, that I wasn't involved now. I had to confront him. But as I stepped out of the car, the last thing I expected happened. The door to my house opened, and one of Kofi's associates stepped out. A tall man, dressed in a black suit, with dark sunglasses that hid his eyes. He walked toward Okafor, nodding respectfully as Kofi turned to face him. I instinctively took a step back, my heart racing. Was this it? Was this the moment I finally found myself in over my head, with no way out? I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew I couldn't just stand there and watch. The moment Kofi saw me, his eyes widened, and I saw something flicker across his face. Fear, regret, or maybe just the realization that his secret life had caught up with him. "Promise," Kofi said, taking a step forward. "What are you doing here?" I felt the anger rise up within me, stronger than anything I had ever felt before. "What am I doing here? I should be asking you that, Kofi," I said, my voice steady but cold. "How could you do this? How could you lie to me, betray me, and put our children at risk?" Kofi opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He stood there, his face flushed, clearly caught off guard by my sudden appearance. But before he could say anything, Okafor spoke up. His voice was low, menacing, and filled with authority. "I think it's time for you to leave, Promise." I felt a chill run down my spine. The way he said my name, the way he stood there, exuding power and control. It was as if he had already claimed ownership over my life, over everything that had once been mine. "No," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "You're not going to intimidate me. You're not going to scare me into silence." Okafor's smile was thin, calculated. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, stepping closer. "You're already part of this. Your husband made sure of that. And now you're tangled in a mess you can't escape from." I clenched my fists, but I refused to back down. I had come too far to let fear control me now. I looked at Kofi, who was standing there, still silent, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Kofi, is this what you wanted? To destroy everything we built? To drag our children into this mess?" Kofi's eyes shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't speak. His silence was the loudest response he could give. "You think you can just walk away from this?" I said, the words coming out harsh. "You think you can just play with people's lives, put everyone in danger, and expect it to all go away? It doesn't work like that." Okafor stepped even closer now, his presence looming over me. "You're naive if you think you have any say in this. This isn't your fight. It's not even your business. Stay out of it while you still can." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. My heart was racing, but I stood my ground. "No," I said firmly. "This is my fight now. You've involved me. You've dragged me into this, and now you'll have to deal with me." For a moment, there was nothing but silence between us, the air thick with tension. Kofi looked back and forth between Okafor and me, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. It was almost as though he was caught between two worlds, his criminal life and the family he had abandoned. Okafor's gaze hardened, his smile fading. "You think you can take me down? You think you can stop this? You have no idea what you're dealing with." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have the power to take down Okafor or Kofi. But I had one thing that they didn't: my voice. And I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, staring Okafor down. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect my children, to protect myself. You can threaten me, intimidate me, but it won't work. You're not getting away with this." For a split second, I saw something flicker in Okafor's eyes. It was like he was trying to size me up, figure out if I was bluffing. But then he chuckled, a low, menacing sound that sent shivers down my spine. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But remember, promise. You don't get to walk away from this unscathed." With that, he turned and walked back toward his car, signaling his associate to follow. Kofi stood there, his expression unreadable, as if he were watching everything happen in slow motion. "I'll deal with you later," Okafor called over his shoulder before getting into the car. "We'll see how long you last." I stood there, watching them drive off, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. I had just confronted the man who had threatened my family, and yet, I felt no relief. If anything, the situation had just become even more dangerous. And Kofi? He hadn't said a word. He hadn't stood up for me or for our family. I was alone in this, completely alone. As I wheeled myself back inside, I realized that I had reached a breaking point. The past few weeks had forced me to face so many things. Things I wasn't ready for, things that had changed my life forever. But now there was no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever, and I had to find a way to protect my family, even if it meant going up against Kofi, Okafor, and everyone who threatened the life I was trying to rebuild. The following days felt like a blur of tension, dread, and uncertainty. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone was always lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Okafor's men, Kofi's betrayal, the criminal web they had woven around me and my family. It was all too much to process. But I couldn't afford to lose my head now. I had no choice but to move forward, no matter how dangerous it became. My children needed me. I needed to protect them from the storm Kofi had brought into our lives, and I needed to do it fast. I couldn't stop thinking about what Kofi had said during our brief confrontation. "I'm sorry for what I did," he had muttered, his eyes shifting between me and Okafor. I had wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that somewhere deep inside, Kofi was still the man I had once loved. But everything about his actions, everything about the way he had walked away from me, leaving me to pick up the pieces, told me that wasn't true. Kofi had chosen this life. He had made a deal with Okafor, and now he was caught in it. But the worst part was that I was still tied to him, tied to the chaos he had created. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was planning something. Something that would pull me back into the darkness he had brought into our lives. Later that evening, as I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, I received an unexpected call. It was Tunde. "Promise." His voice came through the receiver, tense and serious. "We need to talk." I didn't hesitate. "What's happened?" "I've been in touch with a few of my contacts," Tunde continued, "and I've learned something that I think you need to know. It's about Kofi." My heart raced as I listened. I had no idea what else could possibly be revealed, but I could already feel the weight of what was coming. "He's planning something," Tunde said quietly. "I don't know all the details, but I found out that Kofi's about to make a deal with Okafor. Something big. He's going to try to cover his tracks, but it looks like he's going to pull you into it." I felt my stomach drop. What deal? What was Kofi thinking? Didn't he know how dangerous this was for everyone involved? "What kind of deal?" I asked, my voice trembling. "From what I've been able to piece together," Tunde explained, "Kofi's going to hand over some information to Okafor, something that will clear his name. In exchange, he'll be left alone. But that means you and the kids will be exposed. Okafor doesn't forgive easily." I was silent for a moment, trying to process everything Tunde had said. Kofi was making a deal with the devil, and I was going to be caught in the crossfire. "Promise," Tunde continued, his voice low and serious. "This isn't just about you and Kofi anymore. This is about survival. If you're going to get out of this, you need to act now. You need to get ahead of Kofi, get ahead of Okafor, before they pull you further into this mess." I swallowed hard. How could I possibly get ahead of them? I was just a woman in a wheelchair, a mother trying to protect her children. I didn't have the resources, the power, or the knowledge to take on someone like Okafor. But Tunde's words had sparked something inside of me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Determination. I couldn't keep running. I couldn't keep hiding. I had to fight. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. "Tell me what I need to do." Tunde paused for a moment, as if considering his next words carefully. "I think it's time we turn the tables. But we need information, Kofi's information. You need to find a way to get it before Okafor does. If we can expose what Kofi's been involved in, maybe we can force him to make a choice. His freedom or his family." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Felt like a dangerous game, but it was the only choice I had. Kofi had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. "How do I get this information?" I asked, my voice quieter now, but still filled with resolve. Tunde's answer was simple, but it chilled me to the bone. "You'll have to go to Kofi. You need to get him to talk." The idea of facing Kofi again, of confronting him about everything he had done, was terrifying. But I couldn't ignore the reality any longer. If I didn't act now, I would lose everything. "I'll do it," I said firmly. "I'll get the information. But Tunde, if anything happens to me, I need you to take care of the kids. They can't be left alone in this." "I will," he promised, his voice filled with sincerity. "I won't let anything happen to you. Just stay smart, stay safe." As the call ended, I sat there in the silence of the room, the weight of my decision settling over me. The plan was dangerous, insanely dangerous, but it was the only way out. I wasn't just fighting for my survival anymore. I was fighting for my children's future. I was fighting to protect everything I had left. The next morning, I found myself standing outside Kofi's office building, my heart pounding in my chest. The confrontation I had been dreading was finally here. I had no idea how it would go, no idea what Kofi would say or do when I confronted him with the truth. But I couldn't back down now. I wheeled myself toward the entrance, steeling myself for whatever was about to come. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. When I reached his office, I wasn't sure what to expect. Kofi was sitting behind his desk, his back to me. He turned around when he heard the door open, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes, something that resembled guilt. "Promise," he said, his voice low. "I didn't expect you to come here. I thought you were done with me." "I should be," I said, my voice cold. "But I'm not. I need to know the truth, Kofi. Everything. Now." Kofi looked at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with conflict. He knew he had crossed a line. He knew what was at stake. But would he tell me the truth? Or would he keep lying to protect himself? I waited, my heart racing. The silence between us stretched on, until Kofi finally spoke. "I never wanted it to go this far," he said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. "But it's too late now. It's all too late." Kofi's words hung in the air, thick with regret and fear. The man I had once known, the man who had promised me everything, who had been the father of my children, was standing before me, admitting that it was all too late. His betrayal, his lies, the dangerous world he had pulled me into, it was all spiraling out of control. "I never wanted it to go this far," he repeated, his voice shaking. "But I was in too deep, promise. You don't understand. Couldn't just back out. I made a deal with Okafor. I had no choice." His admission stung more than I expected. I had suspected as much, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel real. It wasn't just about an affair anymore. Kofi had chosen his path. He had chosen to get tangled in a world of crime, money laundering, and deceit. And now I was stuck in the middle of it. The same world that had come after me, threatening my family and my safety. "You had a choice, Kofi," I said, my voice hard. "You could have come to me. You could have been honest. You could have told me the truth. But instead, you chose to drag me down with you." Kofi looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I thought I could protect you," he muttered almost to himself. "But I didn't know how deep it was. I thought I could fix it. I could feel my anger rising." "Fix it?" You've destroyed everything. My trust, my love for you. Everything we had is gone. You've pulled me and the kids into your mess. Kofi. There's no fixing this now. I could see the regret in his eyes, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. He had made his choice, and so had I. I wasn't going to stand by and let him drag me down with him any longer. You're right, he said quietly, his voice full of defeat. There's no going back now. I've made a deal with Okafor, and I can't get out of it. He's in control now. The words hit me like a slap. Kofi had sold his soul. He had made a deal with a man like Okafor, and now there was no way to get out of it. I didn't know if I could trust him anymore. But one thing was clear, he wasn't the man I had married. He wasn't the man I had built my life with. I'm not asking you to fix this, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. I'm asking you to keep our children safe. They didn't ask for this. They didn't ask to be dragged into your world of lies and danger. You owe them that much, Kofi. Protect them. He looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt, but he didn't say anything. I could tell he was torn. He knew what he had done, but he couldn't undo it. I'm done with you, Kofi, I said, the finality of my words hitting me as hard as they hit him. I'm done with your lies. I'm done with your betrayal. If you care about anything at all, you'll make sure that our children are safe. You'll keep them out of this mess you've created. There was a long silence between us. Kofi seemed lost in thought, his mind racing as he tried to figure out what to do next. But I had already made my decision. I was leaving him behind for good. I will protect them, he said finally, his voice quiet but resolute. I'll do whatever I can to make sure they're safe. I nodded, standing up from my chair. That's all I ask. I turned and wheeled myself toward the door, but before I could leave, Kofi called out. Promise, wait, he said, his voice tinged with desperation. You don't understand. Okafor. He won't stop. He won't let me go. I've already made too many deals with him, and now he's involved in this. He'll come after you. He'll come after all of us. I paused at the door, feeling a cold rush of fear wash over me. I had heard enough about Okafor to know what he was capable of. The man was dangerous, ruthless, and if Kofi was right, there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. I've already accepted that, I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. But I won't let him destroy everything we've fought for. I won't let him destroy me or my children. With that, I turned and walked out, leaving Kofi behind. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The next few days were a blur. I focused all my energy on protecting my family, making sure the kids were safe and trying to put together a plan. I knew that Okafor wouldn't stop, that he would come after me and my children. But I wasn't going to sit by and wait for him to make his move. I reached out to Tunde, who was just as determined as I was to put an end to this nightmare. Together, we worked to gather as much information as we could. Anything that could help us stop Okafor before it was too late. But despite our efforts, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about information or strategy. It was about survival. Okafor was dangerous, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. And with Kofi's betrayal hanging over me, there was no telling how far he would go to make sure he covered his tracks. One evening, as I was sitting with Tunde, going over everything we had learned, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for only a moment before answering. Promise? Came Kofi's voice, sounding panicked. You need to listen to me, Okafor. He's coming for you. You have to get out of there. Now. I felt my heart race as I listened to him. What do you mean? What's going on? He knows you're working with Tunde. He knows you're trying to stop him. Promise you have to leave. You're not safe anymore. The urgency in his voice made my blood run cold. I didn't have much time. Where do I go? I asked, panic rising in my chest. There's a safe house, Kofi said, his voice low. I'll send you the address. You have to go now. Don't wait. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag, told Tunde what was happening, and made a quick decision to leave. But as I gathered my things, one thought kept repeating in my mind. I couldn't trust Kofi anymore. I couldn't trust anything he said. But I also knew that I couldn't stay. I had no choice but to take his warning seriously. As I got in the car and started driving, I couldn't help but wonder how far Okafor would go, how far Kofi's betrayal would push him, and whether I would make it out alive. The game had changed, and now it was time for the final showdown. The safe house was a small, nondescript place on the outskirts of town. It didn't look like much, just a plain, two-story building with a faded coat of paint. But it was enough. Enough to keep me and my children hidden, to keep us safe, at least for now. I had barely slept the night I arrived. The fear that had been building in my chest over the past few weeks was now a constant companion. Okafor was out there. Kofi was out there. They both knew that I was a threat to them. And I knew, no matter how much I tried to deny it, that this wasn't going to end until one of us was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. How had my life turned into this? How had everything I had worked for, everything I had trusted, fallen apart so quickly? I had spent so much of my life trying to make a family, trying to keep us together, and now I was hiding in a house, unsure of what would happen next. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a message from Tunde. Promise, we need to talk. Meet me at the usual spot. It's urgent. I didn't even have to think. I knew I had to see him. Whatever information he had could be the key to getting out of this mess, to finally putting an end to the danger that was lurking over us. But I also knew the risk. If I left the house, if I stepped into the open, I might be walking right into Okafor's hands. But I couldn't stay in hiding forever. I had to make a move. I had to take control of this situation, or it would swallow me whole. I grabbed my bag and quietly slipped out of the safe house, making sure to lock the door behind me. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't afford to make mistakes now. As I drove through the empty streets, my mind kept going back to Kofi. He was the one who had started this whole mess, but now he was nothing more than a pawn in Okafor's game. He had betrayed me, dragged me into his lies, and now he was caught in a world of crime that he couldn't escape from. I didn't know if I could ever forgive him for what he had done. But I also knew that I couldn't waste any more time thinking about him. The past was behind me. What mattered now was the future. My children's future. I arrived at the spot where Tunde had asked to meet me. It was a small park, empty except for a few benches scattered around. The cold night air stung my face, but I didn't mind. I needed the clarity, the sharpness of the night, to keep my mind focused. Tunde was already there, standing by the bench, his face serious as he saw me approach. "Promise," he said, his voice low. "I've got news. I've been tracking Okafor's movements, and we're running out of time." I sat down next to him, trying to steady my breathing. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Tunde looked at me, his eyes full of determination. "Okafor's planning something big. I've been digging into his finances, his business dealings. He's about to make a move that could take everything away from us. If we don't stop him now, everything will be lost." My heart sank. What kind of move? "He's planning to put pressure on Kofi, force him to do something even worse than what he's already done. And if we don't act, he'll come after you next. He'll use you as leverage to get Kofi to do what he wants." I clenched my fists, frustration boiling inside me. "What do we do? How do we stop him?" "We need to get to Kofi," Tunde said urgently. "We need to get him to talk, to confess everything about Okafor, about the deals he's made. If we can do that, we can expose Okafor, take him down before he gets any further." I shook my head. "I don't trust Kofi. I can't trust him. He's the one who got us into this mess." "I know," Tunde said, his voice calm, "but we don't have a choice. Kofi's the only one who can get us the information we need." And right now, he's the only one who can stop Okafor. I thought about it for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Kofi had betrayed me, but if there was even a chance he could help us take Okafor down, I had to try. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'll talk to Kofi. I'll get the information we need." Tunde nodded, his face serious. "Be careful. Okafor has people watching him. He won't make this easy." "I know," I said, standing up, "but I'm done running. This ends now." The next morning, I made my way to Kofi's office. I had no idea how this would play out, but I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't keep hiding. I had to face him. Face the man who had once been my partner, the father of my children, and now the man who had led us into this nightmare. When I arrived, I saw Kofi standing outside, his face a mixture of frustration and guilt. He saw me approaching, and for a moment he froze. "Promise," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want this to happen. I never meant for you to get hurt." I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him, trying to find the man I once knew beneath the layers of lies and deception. But all I saw now was a man who had made choices that couldn't be undone. "You've already hurt me, Kofi," I said quietly. "But this isn't about us anymore. This is about stopping Okafor." He looked away, his face filled with shame. "I can't stop him. He has too much power. If I go against him, he'll destroy me. And you've already destroyed everything," I said harshly. "You put me and the kids in danger. But now you have a choice. You can either help us take him down, or you can let him ruin everything." Kofi's eyes were filled with conflict, but I saw a flicker of something else. Something that looked like regret. "I'll do whatever I can," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. I knew that I couldn't fully trust him, but right now he was my only chance. With one final look, I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. The endgame was close. I didn't know if we could stop Okafor or if it was too late. But I was done running. I was done being a victim. The fight had only just begun. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family.